Hello, Blake Rudis here with F64 Academy and F64 Elite. Today we're going to be talking about part 4 of Adobe Camera Raw 12.3. Now, if you're just joining us or you just happen to find just this video, if you look in the description below, you'll find parts 1, 2, and 3, so you can watch those as well. You don't necessarily have to watch these in any particular order, but all of the information is readily available for you here. If you're wondering where this comes from day 4 of the 30 Days to Photoshop Mastery course. If you like the way this is presented, there are 29 more days all about mastering Photoshop in this course that you can find in the card above or the description below. In this part 4, this final part, we're going to be discussing our optics, geometry, effects, the color calibration tab, which is one of my favorite places in Adobe Camera Raw, ratings in Adobe Camera Raw, snapshots, and presets, and we'll wrap it up with our conclusion. Now, if you hear something in here about moving on to day 5, well, that's only going to be for the individuals who have purchased the 30 Days to Photoshop Mastery course or who are partaking in that course on F64 Academy Elite. In day 5, we're going to be covering things like the local tools, which will be your graduated filter, your radial spot, and your adjustment brush. Those are covered in day 5 and will not be covered here on this 4-part series for Adobe Camera Raw 12.3. So if you want to learn more, you're going to have to take that course. It's a phenomenal course. Everyone who's been through it has given it a raving 4.5, 5-star reviews, and I am just ecstatic by that. So without further ado, let's jump into part number 4. And if you're interested in more, click the card above or the description below, and you can access all the other parts to this series in the description below as well if you missed parts 1, 2, or 3. Let's go. Now, optics, this is where you would use the profile corrections for your given lens. I would tell you that if you're gonna do this, typically do it first before you actually go into editing your image, and I'll tell you why. So if I go right here and I click this box right here, it's gonna use the profile correction for the lens that I have. Now I'm gonna turn that off, watch what happens. See how everything out here gets a little bit darker? Well, I just went through and tediously in my basic settings, fixed my white point so that that didn't blow up back there. Now I changed what's going on here? Well, what's happening is in the optics section here is that this actually has a slight vignette to the edge of that lens. What this is doing is it's removing that vignette. It's saying, okay, this is a Sony FE lens, 16 to 35, 2.8 GM lens. The profile is set to the 16 to 35. So it's going to fix the distortion. We can add distortion to it if we want. It's also going to fix that vignette, or we can add some of that vignette back. I actually like the vignette that we get from that. And actually, I think the vignette that we get from this is a much more natural vignette than we get from the effects that we would see there. Now, if your lens is chipped, meaning the EXIF data is present on the image, you know the EXIF data is present on the image. If you see here that this says 16 to 35 millimeters at 16 millimeters f8. So if I was using my Rokinon 14 millimeter lens, it wouldn't tell me that I was using a 14 millimeter lens here. That would be blank. It wouldn't know that I was using a 14 millimeter lens because it's an all manual lens with no electronic chip. In that case, I would have to find my Samyang or Rokinon lens, the 14 millimeter lens, and select that lens for that profile correction. So if you have an all manual lens, you might end up needing to do this. If it's chipped or it has a chip function in it some way to tell your camera what type of lens you're using, you shouldn't have to worry about that. Adobe is really good about keeping up with all of the profiles for your lenses. Remove chromatic aberration. This is really important. Chromatic aberration is typically what happens on the edges, specifically of wide angle lenses, but it could even happen on even cheaper lenses. Chromatic aberration is this fringe that happens on areas of high contrast to low contrast, which would be areas of detail to areas of white. You'll get a band around that that's either a like purplish band or a greenish band around the areas that it transitions into. So that is actually not necessarily your fault, but it's a technical flaw. It's not an artistic expression. When I see chromatic aberration, the first thing I want to do is fix it. So typically just pressing the remove chromatic aberration button right off the bat can fix that for you. But if you need to get more extensive with that defringing, you have the defringe option down here. This is pretty self-explanatory. It looks confusing at first, but let's zoom down here. This is a good area here. Well, you see there's a little slight purple amount on the edges of these areas and a little bit of green. You just bring the green hue up and it starts to get rid of that green hue. You bring the purple amount over and it starts to get rid of some of that purple hue. Now I usually go about 3 on each, but then I find the hue of that exact purple that we saw on the edge there, and then the hue of that exact green that we saw on the edge there to kind of fix the green fringing that we might have had on the edge in that transition there. Okay, so that looks really good right there. We fixed that fringe. Sometimes you have to do that. You don't always have to do it, but if you do see any fringing on the outside of the edges of your image, fix it. It's a technical flaw. It's not an artistic expression, okay? Geometry, this is where you would go to fix, basically, if you're working with interior architecture images to make the image more upright. This is pretty self-explanatory here. I'm not going to cover it in this one because we don't necessarily need to with this image. But this is where if we said the upright button, this would try to assess our image and make it appear as upright as possible by fixing any horizontal or vertical distortion. It's a really helpful tool when I'm doing my interior architecture images of churches and stuff like that. You also have a manual transformation option here where you can change the vertical or horizontal amount of the image as it kind of bends, and you can rotate it here as well if you want to get more accuracy there on your straighten line, but I don't necessarily need any of this. So I'm going to just press Alt or Option and reset the geometry here. I don't need that. In effects, this is where you can add grain. I talked about grain, like film grain. This is where you can add film grain, which I think it does a pretty good job of adding film grain here to Adobe Camera Raw, but I don't tend to use this. Some people might with black and white images. I don't tend to use it with my photography. What I do use quite often in here is the vignette. And I think there's a very powerful vignette in Adobe Camera Raw. And how that works, the vignette here, we're going to drop down this. I would never use a vignette in here just straight up with just the vignette slider. You always want to get the advanced options. So the highlight priority is the one that you want specifically because it's going to protect highlight areas as you move this vignette over. So this is the amount of the vignette, okay? The midpoint here is how far it goes into your image. The roundness is, do you want a square vignette or a round vignette? Okay, and the feather is how much does it feather into the photo? This looks like a straight up, border at this point. And then highlights is, do you want it to protect the highlight areas of your image? Yes. I would suggest all the time moving that over to +100 all the time, okay? And the reason why is that you don't want your vignette to go over top of highlight areas and create this thing that's called tone compression, where it looks like milky, where it should be white. So from here, I would then set my roundness to dial in where I want that to be. I would then set my feather to see how far I want it to feather into my image, and then set my midpoint to pull it away from that center area, and then adjust how much of that vignette we actually see. A good vignette, actually, and honestly, you shouldn't be able to tell that you used a vignette. But here's the before and after. Before, after. It looks good. It draws the eye into the photo, and that's what the vignettes are for. The calibration tab is one of my favorite tabs in Adobe Camera Raw because you can really get a lot of color data out of here. This is an advanced section. So I'm going to try to talk about this in a way that's really simple. Basically, you see red primary, green primary, and blue primary. What that means is it's the primary pixel value. And here's the deal. Your camera sensor is made up of a bunch of, it's like a grid of red, green, and blue pixels that are on this sensor or squares that record data. Basically, you have twice the amount of green squares on there as you do red and blue squares. So a Bayer matrix sensor, let's say there's 100 squares. 50 of them would be green, 25 would be red, and 25 would be blue. Why is that important? Well, let's take this color sampler here. This color sampler, let's go ahead and we need to clear out all of our samples here. I'm going to grab a new sample, and I'm going to click on this color green, and then this color blue. So that's telling us sample 1 is green, sample 2 is blue. This green is actually 92 red value, 116 green value, 54 blue value. So what that means is that what that Bayer matrix sensor recorded was a 92 on the red pixel value, 116 on the green pixel value, 54 on the blue pixel value. Why is that important? Well, right here in the red primary, we're going to move this over. We don't see any red in our image. What's happening here? Well, those are the red primary sensor areas that made up that Bayer matrix sensor. So as we move this over and increase the saturation in our reds, it's going to make our blues more saturated as well. Now, this is very different than the color mixer. The color mixer takes not the individual pixels that make up the color, but the color itself. So this is modifying the color itself and the hue and saturation of the color itself. Calibration tab is actually taking those very pixel-based level and allowing them to change and modify how all the colors interact throughout the entire process. So this is even going to change how your color mixer interacts on the image as well. So if we change the hue of the reds, you can see we can get them more towards that yellowish color there. And look at the way that's coming out. It looks really good. We're We're going to drop the saturation here a little bit. Moving down to the greens, we're going to see a big lift here because there's a lot more green than there is blue or red, right? So move this up. That looks pretty good. And then we can change the hue of that green pixel value. Okay. This is very different than your white balance. It's very different than your color mixer. It's very different than split toning. This is powerful stuff here. Once you get this down, I'm telling you, this will open up giant doors for you, huge swinging doors. So increase the saturation of the blue and then maybe round off those colors a little bit. So if we click and hold the preview on this, look at how much color we got out of that image. Really cool. The shadows here, this is going to add more magenta to your shadows or more blue to your shadows. I think this looks better with a little bit more magenta added to our shadows. Okay. That looks pretty good. If you like this is pretty neat. What you can do down here is you can 5-star your image, 4-star your image, 3-star your image. This is pretty helpful. This wasn't as prevalent in older versions of Adobe Camera Raw. So let's say we like, this is pretty good. We'll give it a 4-star. It's looking pretty good. Good. Okay. So, and this would actually read what you would read in Bridge too. So if you're in Bridge and you're making your 4 or 5-star, whatever those star values are, this would then be recorded into the EXIF data, which would show up in Bridge or even Lightroom for that matter. Okay. So let's go ahead and exit out of our color sampling here. So we talked a lot about a lot of different things. Now let's talk about snapshots and presets really quickly. A snapshot is basically a recording of everything that you have done on this image. You can see that I've made a bunch of snapshots here for myself. And these are just things that I've done to kind of test some of the settings that I've been doing as I've been experimenting with this Adobe Camera Raw stuff. So if I right click on these, I can delete any one of these snapshots, which I'm going to delete all of them. So I can start new and show you this. Right click, delete snapshot. So what a snapshot does is it's a recording of all the settings that you've done on this image. It's different than a preset. A preset is a recording of things that you've done on your image, but things that can be used on other photos really quickly and really easily. A snapshot is just a recording that gets recorded into this specific RAW file. So if I'm on this RAW file and I want to save these settings, I'm going to call this 2020 test ACR update. Okay, press enter. Now, this basically recorded everything that I just did. Okay. So if I go back to my basic settings, and let's say I change this to black and white, okay? It looks like we have some color that's coming through here. It looks like it's coming from maybe our curve. So I'll press Alt or Option and reset our curve. It's probably coming from the split toning too. So I'll reset our split toning. This is actually a true black and white image now. And then let's say I press the auto button on that. So we get the auto and then black and white. And then I go over to my snapshots and I save another one. 2020 test BW snap. Okay. That's recording those settings that I just did, but I can always go back up here, hover over it and see the difference really quickly, or just click on it and be like, boom, okay, those settings are right there. This is a great way for you to experiment with this. So what you could do is you can make some adjustments to an image, save some snapshots, reset everything by pressing Alt or Option and resetting everything, going back through and making different adjustments. So what we can call this 2020 default reset. So this is what our raw file actually looked like because we reset everything, right? This is what it looked like after we did our adjustments. This is what it looks like after our black and white processing, okay? So these snapshots get saved into the individual image. They do not and cannot be used on other photographs unless you open up multiple photographs with it. So with this other photograph opened here, if I wanted to, I can press and hold Shift, click on the one down here, and then right click and say Sync Settings. And what do I want to sync? This is where it becomes kind of like a preset, where I'm taking the settings that I'm doing on this image, and I'm going to put them on the other image below it. So if I say yes, do that to everything, it looks good, press OK. All the things I did to this photograph are going to happen on this image down here as well, okay? So that's the way that you can sync multiple images. So if you're working on like 15 images from one shoot one night, and you want to grab the settings that you did on one, you can paste them on many different ones. The other way to do that, I'm going to click on this image. I'm going to reset all the settings here. I'll go over to the basic settings, Alter Option, and just start resetting all this stuff here. Perfect. Okay, so that's reset. Why I did that? Because now I'm going to show you presets. And a preset, if we click on our presets here, I have other presets that are already here. Adobe even gives you some presets that will give you a basic kind of look on your photograph. What this does is it actually physically modifies the sliders on your image, okay? So if we go into our preset, we make a new preset, we can make a new preset from anything that we just did on this photograph. So if I press Create Preset, this gives me the option to make the whole thing a preset where I can say, I'll just call this underscore whole edit. I'm gonna do that underscore. That way it shows up first in my list. You don't have to do underscores. I'm just doing that so it shows up first. So I don't have to go looking for it, okay? And then it's gonna go into my user presets. That's everything that we did to this image. We can use it on something else. So I'll press OK. Now I'm gonna make another preset here just so you can see the difference of what it's like to separate out the presets. So I'm gonna make a new preset. And in this preset, let's say I just wanna use the split toning effect. The other cool thing about this, before you do that, if you click where it says subset, you can see just the things that you've modified. So by default, it's going to be everything that Adobe Camera Raw wants you to put on there. If we go to modified, it's only the things that I edited on this individual image, okay? Or we can go into just the basic settings that we did. We can go into just the optics, just the split toning. But one way that we can do this without having to go in and do the drop down is if we press Alt or Option and click on, say, split toning. Now, the only thing that's going to happen in this one is going to be our split tone. So I'll do underscore split tone, and then I'll press OK. So now if I click on this image, now this is not a snapshot, okay? Because if it was a snapshot, I could only use it on this photo. So now if I go into my user presets, you see here where it says whole edit, everything that I did to that photo before has now been recorded into that preset. And there we go. Now, if I click on this one, it's just going to be that split tone. And it's only going to change that split tone. Now, because I told it to do the whole image preset, that already included the split tone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the basic settings. I'm going to Alt or Option click and reset the split toning. So now if I go back over here to the preset that we had and say split tone, this is just going to put any of that split toning on this image. It's not going to put all the stuff on there because the only thing that's included in here is the split tone. And the way you can see that is if we Alt or Option reset all of this stuff, everything's reset there, good to go, okay? Go back to that preset. We just click on the split tone one. See, it's only gonna be doing the split toning because that's all we told this preset to record. So presets are a thing that you can use on all your images. Any image you bring in here in the future, you can use that preset on. And snapshots are only contained in the individual image. So I know we covered a ton of stuff in this, but as I said in the beginning of this, Adobe Camera Raw is the baseline for all of the editing that you're gonna be doing going into Photoshop. So you really need to make sure you've got a good grasp on this stuff. Thanks for watching this part of the 30 Days to Photoshop Mastery course. If you like this, there is plenty more in the 30 Days to Photoshop Mastery course. You can find that in the card above and in the link below. And if you want to watch the other parts to this little mini series that I've pulled from the 30 Days to Photoshop Mastery course, you can look in the description below and navigate to each individual part for quick access. I do hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot from it, and I hope it made the new Adobe Camera Raw a little bit easier for you. Thank you for taking time to watch this. I sincerely appreciate it.